It is trending Reds rather than talking Reds. Do confirm in the comments if you can hear us, because then we can all be very positive and move forward 100%. I've got Josh Williams. Why is it trending Reds in association with NordVPN, who are the reason why we're doing Talking Reds all the way through? Is because me and Josh did some free videos about the way in which stats are used, starting off with XG, and we said, well, we'll do a Q&A. Get your comments in. I've got them here. I've got a couple of emails, and I've got some tweets and some other bits and pieces as well. But obviously it clashes with breaking news. The breaking news goes two ways. First and foremost, the breaking news was that Martin Zubimendi looked really rather lined up for Liverpool, and now there's the idea that there will be a charm offensive from Real Sociedad, Josh, to see if they can keep him. Liverpool can just pay the release clause. This is the most important thing. Liverpool haven't got to talk Sociedad into anything. But it's worth saying the footballer clearly has got a long-standing huge fondness for the club. He's from the region. I like loyal footballers. I like loyal footballers who play for Liverpool, though. So you can't not come over like a hypocrite. Paul Joyce is saying that there is that charm offensive. It is ongoing. I think this was always likely to happen. It's more the order of events. I think normally we hear about these stories, the other side of clubs saying, please stay, please stay, please stay, when the players decided to go.
Yeah, it is. It feels a little bit ominous, to be honest, at the minute. And I think the best way we can understand it from our side is it's like Real Madrid trying to poach Steven Gerrard, really, isn't it? Like you have that level of dedication to the Basque clubs. I have spoken to a few people, and they were originally surprised that like Liverpool were able to get him out of Sociedad. So it's no surprise that this is kind of going this way. If Liverpool do manage to land him, it is massive. It's testament to the suits of the club nowadays that are doing this work. But it was never going to be easy.
It was. I mean, it's worth saying it was never going to be easy. Other clubs have had a really good go, and Liverpool have clearly found something that they want to be able to say. For me, Josh, there's a couple of things here. One is that Liverpool, sort of as a region, does have its own distinct identity that may well marry up. But I think there's also, and the reason why I think the footballers should move is, I know you've looked at Sociedad's numbers, I've looked at Sociedad's numbers. Sociedad played Champions League last season, they finished 6th this season, they won't be in it again, but this lad's just got the flavour of silverware with the Euros. And, you know, with the greatest of respect to Sociedad, I don't quite see a world where they're winning La Liga or the Champions League anytime soon, whereas Liverpool have got a chance, if Zubimendi signs a 5-year deal, of giving them medals in both of those competitions. And I think that when you're 25 years old, I think there is a time to step up and go and do the next thing.
Yeah, well, it's worth saying, you know, given the fact that he's 25, he has dedicated a lot of his career already to Sociedad, and he's at that point now maybe where he's making that leap, so he can make that step up and start delivering at a club that, I mean, you could argue really, I mean, I don't want to put the red tinted glasses on here, but you could argue that Liverpool is a kind of, you know, an English version of what the Basque clubs can offer to Spanish players, you know, in terms of that family element that you've got there. And I think if he has spoke to Xabi Alonso in any kind of way, Xabi would sell that sort of thing. It's a family club. Virgil says that all the time, and you know, he'd feel at home here if he does feel at home in Sociedad. So hopefully the deal gets done. You know, he is a good player, good all-rounder. Not very many weaknesses, not very many standouts either, but just pretty good, like 7 out of 10 of pretty much everything. And obviously he takes that kind of positional need that we've got as a you know, he can play as a lone 6. So I'd like to see it happen still, but
Do you think we're going to play with a lone 6? I don't. Really, I'd be really surprised if that changes. But if you look at his defensive work, a lot of it pulls to the right. And I sort of think Liverpool might think, yeah, there's the way we want to play. He's absolutely very rarely loses the ball, really good under pressure. You know, we're inviting pressure on. That's part of the strategy here. That's what we're going to do. I feel as though Liverpool, you know, he doesn't lose that many dribbles, good in the air, so he's good at his duels. I think that, you know, if you'd have said Liverpool are looking for a midfielder who looks after the ball really well, plays well under pressure and wins his duels, I think that's what Liverpool are looking for, and that's what he is.
Yeah, exactly. I think for me it's predominantly an on-ball signing. I think it's a player who, I think if you watch Liverpool during pre-season, this kind of double pivot with the back four, building the game from the back, the biggest shift that we've kind of experienced so far for me is the sheer commitment to building from the back and enticing pressure and being able to play through that pressure. And we've got players who are good at doing that, but we've got no naturals in there when it comes to building that game, getting you out of the defensive third and into the business end. So he looks like a natural when it comes to doing that. He looks like he's done it for years now. Spanish players historically are just really good at doing that anyway. So I think he'd offer a bit of a solution for us in that department. And the way he's had Jones doing it, he's had Gravenberg attempting to do it, Szoboszlai's done it at times. I think Zubimendi would be a natural solution to that.
Well, Jones is the only one who hasn't played that side. So Endo's had a go that side, Szoboszlai had a go that side, and Gravenberch had a go that side. I thought it's noticeable that all three of them. Jones, it looks to me like it'll be McAllister and Jones predominantly playing on the left of whatever this is. Maybe McAllister might do bits off the right as well. Zubimendi coming in to do the right. Like, to me, that feels as though that's the setup, because it was striking to me that Jones in all of these games plays to the left, if you see what I mean, and that's what we saw him do when he comes through. And one of the questions we've actually had when I've asked for questions around this is that idea of, you know, how do you see the midfielders next to him? How would that work? The statistical profile with McAllister and Jones, both of them are really good at keeping it under pressure. Both of them are really strong at ball recoveries as well. And I can just sort of see a bit of a situation where if you take McAllister, Zubimendi, if he comes, Jones and Gravenberch, I'm quite comfortable with, and even Szoboszlai, if it happens from time to time, I'm quite comfortable with any of them as a pair, with the possible exception of Szoboszlai and Gravenberch. The rest, you can really envisage how they would work as a pair, both in terms of the eye, but also what the stats tell you.
Yeah, I agree. It has been very much a midfield too, from what we've seen, and the third midfielder, if you want to call him that, has been much, much higher. So it has been a kind of two-man partnership in there. I think those two players, with them being a partnership, can offer similar perks. I don't think it necessarily has to be one serene technician and one absolute dog. I think you can just, I think in the modern game you can kind of mix that up a little bit. So
I think you've got to almost, if you want to play at the very highest level, I don't think you can have, you know, I just don't think you can. I don't think any top side now has got genuine pretensions of winning actual silverware can carry a midfield dog. I just don't think it's worth it anymore.
No, I agree. And I think looking at that, I personally would say, I think if you're picking out the starting 11, if you want like the Liverpool's best 11, which you never see nowadays because you've got a game every 3 days, but if it was that, I think it would be a McAllister, Zubimendi pivot personally. But then you've got Jones playing for minutes, you've got Gravenberch playing for minutes, Bajcetic is in there, so you've got options as the bottom line. But I think getting in someone who's a bit more of a specialist in that first phase of the pitch, I think will do wonders for Liverpool. And looking at his age as well and what he's done throughout his career so far, he's a plug and play, which is what I think you're struggling to find looking at the market now. I think there's very few players out there that you can just pick off, put into Liverpool, and it just works from the off.
I think the idea of the plug and play element, I think, will appeal to them. I still think even if he signs, I don't think he necessarily gets either of the first 2 games. I think that, I think that, and this is what people are going to have to sort of get used to a little bit. I think that the manager will have his plan for at least the first couple, and then the next phase of this as well, and then everyone's going to start on our first 11s. But then you look at the intensity and the reality of the way the fixtures are going to be and how many of those games are going to really matter. If you want to win the league, every game matters, and to get out of this 36 team group in the Champions League, you're going to probably have to win 5 of your 8 games, and that doesn't mean you can write the other ones off. I hasten to add, you're probably going to need to get 16 points to finish in the top 8 of that Swiss system sort of set up. And what that means is you could have a week, I pointed one out before, where Liverpool find themselves, they've got an away game against Wolves, a Champions League game, that could be another away game, and then an away game against Palace. You're going to need to have genuine options in every part of the pitch, and that's the other reason why I think he really appeals, in terms of trusting that he'll just get it and be ready to go quite quickly. Yeah,
and on top of that as well, I think England is just physically the most demanding league in Europe, really. We have probably the shortest winter break, I think I'm right in saying.
Well, there's none this season.
Well, there's none, yeah, okay.
So that's short.
Yeah, definitely.
It doesn't get shorter.
I think that's one of the reasons maybe Szoboszlai tailed off a little bit last season, because he's accustomed to that throughout his career, and then he has to go through a period where he just has to keep going pretty much. So I think having options in there is going to benefit everyone, and I think if we do sign Zubimendi as well, I personally would expect him to put on a bit more beef. I think that happened to Rodri when Rodri signed, even though Rodri's already like 6'3".
Yeah.
So I think he'll undergo that period of development as well. So it could even be a case of, similar to what Fabinho went through, where we just gradually bed him in. I think he's a bit more of a natural on his own than Fabinho was.
And also the way we're playing, because one of the things that happens to Fabinho is that he's used to a 2, comes, and then suddenly we're asking him to be on his own.
Exactly, yeah.
The flip side of this is Zubimendi's playing a little bit deeper, doesn't have that much of a 2, although I think he does have a fair bit of support, but he doesn't have that much of a 2, but he's used to being in that area of the pitch, so you think he could only be helped by the idea of another footballer. And also in general, everyone's learning under Slot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like McAllister's only done 3 training sessions with him by now. Yeah. So everyone's learning there, aren't they, as well?
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing. I think under Slot as well, I think Slot might unlock a bit of an element of his game regarding his ball progression. I think his progressive passes on a per 90 basis is generally decent. I think he's posting about 5 or something like that, but historically slot midfielders post loads basically. So I think, you know, when he comes to Liverpool, I think he'll be encouraged maybe to try a little bit more potentially, be a little bit more progressive, accelerate the game a little bit more, whereas Sociedad, as you mentioned earlier, just a bit safe maybe as a team. A bit they dominate the ball still. I think they see about 55% of the ball, but it is just safe and generally quite defensive. They don't generate a lot of shots at all. I think they're about 10th in their league for progressive passes in total, so quite a safe team compared to Liverpool, who are going to be a bit more from foot, I think.
Yeah, they're a team who only just average over 2 goals a game in terms of for and against. Last season they only scored themselves, I think it's about 51. Their expected goals was only about 44. So this is not a side, you know, the good at game state. They pick the moments really, really well, but most of the games they're only winning by 1 goal, and the games are relatively low score, and that's what brought them to the party, by the way. You know, they come 6th last season, they came 4th the year before, they got out of the Champions League group. So let's not talk it down, it's a way to play football. But if you're playing for Liverpool, any Liverpool side this season, the expectation will be to score on the other side of 80 goals. You've got to be more progressive, haven't you?
Yeah, but I think the beauty of that is, though, I think if you watch Liverpool last season, you could argue just watching the team how chaotic they were at times, what they lacked maybe when it comes to managing certain game states. You could argue Liverpool just needed to add a little bit of Real Sociedad to what they were doing. So if you can pick up their 6, you know, the boyhood star, maybe the wonder kid who's kind of come through the ranks and that, and is now maybe the player that everyone wants in there, and you can just put that into the Liverpool recipe, you know, you should get a nice result there where you've still got Liverpool, but you've got a bit more control over games.
Absolutely. Got a few comments in all the way through. First and foremost, anyone who says that anything's embarrassing if transfers don't happen, just don't be embarrassed by things that have nothing to do with you and don't impact your life. Never, ever, ever accept secondary embarrassment. It's not you. If Liverpool do not buy a player, it is not on you. And do not start any of that nonsense. It's just simply not worth it. And going from there, there's also this idea, I think, that, you know, within this, if it doesn't happen now, it'll feel like as though the people who are running Liverpool have exposed themselves a little bit. It's now different people who are making these transfer decisions than it was last season. It's worth pointing that out. I think that, you know, Josh, I think that Liverpool can control bits and pieces of news that gets out, but they can't silence everything all the way through. And I think that therefore then if something does break around a transfer because it's a legitimate transfer, Liverpool got legitimate interest, they're putting the money in, people just got to roll with the punches a bit more. It's very difficult these days to have the idea of the first thing you hear about the player is that it's on the back of the Echo. Yeah,
I mean, it wouldn't be the greatest start if we're being honest, but then at the same time, it is definitely an ambitious start, trying to get a player out of Real Sociedad who is quite clearly, you know, got roots at the club. A lot of clubs, by all accounts, Arsenal, Bayern Munich, I've tried in the past to get him and haven't succeeded. You know, fans are always calling for ambition, show ambition in the market and stuff like that, and this would certainly be an ambitious first move for the new gang of suits that are in there now. Just got to hope that they get it done, but if they don't, you know, I'm sure there'll be other options out there that we can target.
David Chalmers in the comments says, what about the numbers really excite you and what about them worry you a little bit?
So this is what's interesting about Zubimendi. I think in terms of what excites me, there's not a great deal that leaps out the page and says, boss, you know, that sort of thing. I think he retains the ball really well, doesn't really lose the ball cheaply at all, doesn't give it away much at all. I think you need that from just watching Liverpool's first couple of pre-season friendlies. He's also better aerially than I would have thought. And he seems to, I mean, this is a small sample, but he seems to perform well, if not better, in the Champions League compared to La Liga, which bodes well for stepping up a level. In terms of negative stuff that I'm worried about, in the numbers, again, there's not a lot that leaps out. And again, that's probably a positive, a general positive looking at the numbers, that there's not a great deal there that's shining massively, but there's no weaknesses either. So it's kind of like solid, steady Eddie, maybe 7 out of 10 in every department. Only scope for improvement, really. There's not a lot that you can target and think, right, he's really bad at that, or he's not good on the ball, or, you know, he's defensively weak or something like that. He's just pretty much good at everything, is what I've found.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are quite interesting in the Champions League numbers. So it's obviously a smaller sample and it's compared to a smaller sample. You've got to watch that. But I think his passing percentage 89%, which puts him 91st percentile, i.e. amongst midfielders in the top 10%, is really good. His pressured pass percentage is really good as well. The turnovers are outrageous. He's 98th percentile in terms of how few he loses, and I think that's exceptional, and that's part of what Liverpool are looking for. There's also something else that's really interesting in that his opposition ball recovery is 98th percentile as well in the Champions League. Considering the fact that the Champions League's a more intense competition than La Liga, I think it's interesting that he pops there. And also on dribble successfully defended, it's down at 64%, which doesn't sound like it's unreal, but the actual percentile that puts you in is 97th percent. So again, top 3% in terms of defending dribbles as a midfielder, which if you think about the number of times we've seen Liverpool ran through, as people sort of depict it, I think that bodes well. Not necessarily that he's even particularly winning the ball. The tackles aren't high, but that's not the best way to defend a dribble at times. The best way to defend a dribble is just to hold it up. Yeah. Stop it, slow it down, make them start again, go from there. So I think that's really interesting. That's to me, that shows again a controlling element. It's not the idea he's trying to win he's not going to be a full Fabinho where he's winning the biggest tackle in the world. It's instead the idea of can this just stop, please? You reset, we reset, and I think that could be really important for Liverpool.
Yeah, I think the type of six that he is, I think kind of depicts the difference in Liverpool from Klopp to Slot. I think the difference that Liverpool are going to undergo is represented by the shift in maybe what we're asking for from this kind of DM. I think he's a player who's not necessarily going to come off the pitch at the end covered in mud. I don't think he's going to be a bully necessarily like Fabinho was at times. Yeah. But I think he's going to address certain elements of what we just need from this kind of metronome in there a little bit. A player who wins the ball for you, a player who when he wins it, keeps it above all else. And at times when he's under pressure, he can cope, he can keep his head. And at times when the opportunity's there to move the ball forward and accelerate the game into the final third, he'll do that as well. So he's a natural when it comes to all of that sort of stuff. As I say, he doesn't have very many weaknesses either. So all things considered, 25, plug and play, you can put him in immediately and he'll do a job for you. I think all things considered, given the state of the market for sixes as well, I think that's crucial to consider. Just seems like a really sensible sign.
It does indeed. Matthew Kane's asked Zubimendi playing on the right hand side, do you think he could help Trent? And it then says if he stays at right back. I mean, I struggle to see him not staying at right back if Zubimendi signs, Josh, because Liverpool be so overindulged there. It's just the idea of maybe giving him a little bit more protection. I think it's the first time I've heard anyone say that, but I think it's, and that's a valid point. I think the idea that Trent can feel a little bit more liberated. It was interesting watching Liverpool's build up in the tour games. It felt as though, not TAW but TOUR, those games where it felt as though we don't have our own games yet. It's not like the Olympiad, but if we do, things like shuffleboard will probably be in there. There's a thing where I think where you watch them build up, and they built up. Obviously, the centre half stay. It felt like one midfielder would go, one would stay, and it felt like one full-back had sort of stayed quite responsible most of the times, although it's worth saying Bradley ends up setting up a goal that Tsimikas knocks in at the back post. So it felt to me like there was always four in sort of defensive positions much of the time to pick up the ball and squeeze the play, but then the others could go and attack. And I wonder whether or not Zubimendi, given his characteristics, could really help Trent out in that area.
Well, I think he can help out almost without being that defensive monster. Almost he can help out just by keeping the ball over there and wanting to stay behind the ball as well. He's a player who wants to be middle third, defensive third, really. He's not going to go and leave Trent isolated. He's not going to maybe try too much on the ball where he suddenly loses it and Trent is caught high up the field and then Trent starts getting criticised for being out of position or whatever. So he's going to offer a bit of glue in there, I think. He's going to just kind of keep things ticking over, dictate tempo to a certain level. But that kind of, I think we've got a lot of midfielders in there who will try things when it's maybe not on, and he strikes me as the kind of typically Spanish midfielder really who will just make the optimal decision a lot of the time, and so, most of the time that might be safe, that might be backwards, it might be lateral, but it will ensure that you keep the ball. And I think under Slot, that's something that we're really going to value. It's about killing them with passes, as he said himself.
Yep, another good comment from Declan Pearce. He says, I think it's important to remember that if they're trying to convince him to stay, he's clearly showed serious intent on leaving, which won't be a decision that he's taken lightly. I think it's worth sort of pointing that out, Josh. Clubs do get to make one last throw at it to offer more money to their own players, especially if they've got a release clause in there. The idea that Liverpool might just have to pay. And the other thing that Sociedad might just be signalling to Liverpool as well is, don't come and negotiate with us. You know what the amount is, you give us all the money, you don't get them. It's as simple as that. You give us all the money up front, because that's the way it works in Spain. You've got to deposit all the money up front, then you can have them, and it works that way round. It might be that Sociedad are also signalling that if we do not want to let him go under any circumstances, we're not up for a negotiation, we're prepared to increase his contract, do whatever it takes to keep him in the short term, but if he is going to go, then the situation is that we're unwilling sellers, and they could just be signalling that as well.
I think Liverpool will definitely have to pay the release clause up front. I'll be very, very surprised if there's any kind of negotiations in there where Liverpool gets come up with these kind of specialist terms or whatever. And I think that stems from the fact that the player is under contract and he loves living there and all that. He's a boyhood fan of the club and everything. So there's no real pressure there to sell. And if you look at Sociedad's situation as well, there's La Marchand is already gone, I think, to Atletico Madrid. Mikel Merino's getting strongly linked to Arsenal. And then Zubimendi would be a player who I think they'd be a bit more surprised to lose. So they're 3 big losses. It's kind of your spine as well, really, in one summer. Bear in mind, Zubimendi is a fan of the club. He's not going to want to leave them in a situation where they're kind of a little bit messy and they're going to undergo a period of struggles now for the next 12 months or something. So I think they've got legitimate grounds to convince him to stay, and I think he will naturally have more of an emotional attachment to his club where he doesn't want to leave them in a sour spot. But it's just, I mean, if Liverpool are trying to get him, they must have some kind of grounds to think that they can convince him to come to Anfield. And even Anfield itself offers an element of almost mystique, really, when you think about it. You know, when it comes to that.
100%.
I think there's an element of that with, you know, what we've done to Barcelona in the past couple of seasons. And
well, we know, Josh, one of the things that we know is that the club has both printed and video-based materials of things like the parades, the way Anfield is. You know, the club does look to put that in front of players and says, this is what it means to come and play here. This is the way in which it goes. That's part of the attraction package that Liverpool do put together, is saying it is Liverpool, it is different, and it's something that you should want to be part of. It doesn't always work. I suspect it doesn't work as often as it should. We all would like it to, if the way we think about football, but, you know, part of the offer is, come here, it's different, it's better, you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I always go back to the Villarreal game as well, where we get. I think we lost the first game 1-0 away, Villarreal under Marcelino. He celebrates like he's won the tie, and then we come to Anfield, beat them 3-0. There's the semi-final under Emery where we beat Villarreal twice, I think. But I think the first one we were comfortable. The second one we come from behind. Atletico Madrid we've faced many times. We did lose a few, but you know, that's always kind of an intense tie. So I think the picture in Spain that's being painted of Liverpool, I think, is an accurate one. And you just got to hope that we can kind of sell that kind of vision, that prospect to a player like Zubimendi, who is quite clearly happy where he is. It's just going to be tricky getting him out of there, isn't it?
Is indeed. Listen, we are doing this live and for free by virtue of our relationship with NordVPN. Right now, if you go to nordvpn.com/TAW, you can get a mega discount and 4 extra months for whatever you would use such a VPN for. It's worth pointing out at the minute, it's somewhat frustrating, the limitations on the public broadcaster's Olympic coverage in this country, and it may well be there's a public broadcaster in another country that has outstanding Olympic coverage. I don't know, maybe just NBC. But it's just one man's opinion, that you may well get your attention and find it quite interesting. Also, I think it's actually quite interesting to see the way different countries cover the Olympics, because obviously everyone sees it through a national lens, but then there's which events matter to which countries and which ones don't. Anywhere that puts a lot of volleyball on has got my full support, what with volleyball being the best of the games. It also protects your online activity and gets you tons and tons of security on that as well, and ensures that when you are abroad, if you are on holiday, you can yourself be able to check back in with what's happening in the UK on television and other formats as well, with a minimum of fuss. So we'd like you to sign up. Obviously we would, and it's NordVPN are the reason why we're putting these out for free over the course of the summer. So it's nordvpn.com/TAW. It is all on there, and it works on up to 10 devices with a single subscription as well. So all of that is worth bearing in mind wherever you are in the world, and going from there. We've just put a poll on the YouTube, which is very flash, but blocks me being able to see your comments. So that's somewhat frustrating. Let me just sort of close that. That's worked. Marvellous stuff. That is really quite special. We asked for questions when we did the trends video, Josh, and I've got a couple here as we go all the way through. I'll pull them up. One or two came in on the email. The first one that I want to do on the email is from Johnny Roche. We'll come back to Zubimendi in a minute. He says, what StatsBomb metrics do we look to for an improvement to those gift goals conceded in 23-24? I think it's as simple as you're able to use it on StatsBomb or on any stats platform. It's just saying how many chances of high quality Liverpool have given up in the first 15 minutes. They have a bit of hard lines at times last season. You know, Danny Welbeck does just blam in a low quality chance at Anfield from 25 yards, and it feels like it's happening again, but that's not giving a soft chance away. But then there's the Eze one, which is a really high value chance that Liverpool concede early in a game. I think it's the second to next home game after then, and Liverpool concede it. I think the main thing we just need to do is not be giving away. If you can be unlucky, but Liverpool need to not be giving away high value XG chances in the first half an hour of games at Anfield.
Yeah, and I think over the course of the season as well, one of the elements that I look at just to determine whether Liverpool have been lucky or unlucky is just whether we're conceding more than expected or whether we're conceding under what we expect. So, say for example, over the course of a full season, Liverpool are expected to concede 30 goals based on the shots that they've faced, and Liverpool concede 40. That suggests that we've either been unlucky or we've got a bad goalkeeper or a bit of both. Or if Liverpool concede 20, it suggests we've maybe been lucky and we've got a really good goalkeeper. But then next season, if you face 30 shots worth of goals again, you could argue you're going to concede closer in line with that, which is not good. So that's where we predict, like, you know, this team's fortunate at the moment. In the near future, the Bobby gonna come across harder times when it comes to results and things like that. So, but this forecasting stuff is tricky when it comes to the top teams because they've got the best players. So. It is.
It's just worth pointing out, and the underlying numbers match what I'm about to say. So last season, Liverpool in the first half an hour of games, home and away, scored 17 and conceded 14. And the season before, 22-23, they scored 19 and conceded 18. And the underlying numbers broadly back that up, in broad strokes, back that up. That's where they were. The underlying numbers also back this up though. Arsenal last season in the first half an hour scored 25 and conceded 8. The season before, Arsenal scored 29 and conceded 11. Last season, City scored 29 and conceded 8, and the season before, City scored 27 and conceded 8. If Liverpool match either of those two things and the rest stays the same, and that doesn't happen because scoreboards are a thing and scoreboard pressure is a thing, but if Liverpool match either of those two, well, any of those four, really, Arsenal in either of the two seasons, City in either of the two seasons, when people have talked about Slot finding quick wins and quick improvements, for me, Josh, this is just one of the most obvious ones. If Liverpool match Arsenal and Manchester City in those numbers, given what we actually saw in the later periods of games, it would just be a huge improvement and it'd take the pressure off the team.
See, I think those numbers represent Liverpool's lack of control in many ways. I think Liverpool last season and the season before, when it was really bad, when the scores level and they're going toe to toe with whoever they were going up against, I felt they really struggled to control games, and it got to a point where Liverpool gained control, maybe because they've gone a goal down and the team's sitting back and you can pen them in then and you can keep going. But when it was like, you know, scores level 0-0, first half an hour of the game, both teams are going from a neutral standpoint, Liverpool struggled to control games over the past 2 years, really, and those numbers visualise that. So if we can get to a point where, like Arsenal and City, they just control games from the off, even when the opposition are going for it, and when the scores are level and all that, that will represent for me a proper side where everything's under control, you've got everything going the way you want it to go, and you can start scoring goals and getting away from them.
Absolutely. Really interesting that the same person sort of asks about the OBV numbers, saying would they be skewed to on ball carriers and things like that. It's worth saying that when OBV's done on ball value, or however anyone does the idea of control versus momentum, it happens in the round, doesn't it, Josh? So basically, there'll be a lot of neutral passes. If Liverpool have passed it sideways more, those passes will end up being counted as neutral passes, depending on what happens next with the play. I think it's important not to get too caught up on those metrics. Feyenoord had a really high collective on ball value. The point being is that when sides like Feyenoord or like Liverpool or Manchester City or Arsenal decide it's time to move forward, you get to see, for instance, Doku has got an unbelievable dribbling and carrying on ball value. It's setting the play and then going. It's not the idea of just going. And I think that's to your control point as well. It doesn't mean that you're not making valuable chances, you're not getting the ball forward. It means that you set the play first and then you move forward.
Yeah, and an important thing as well to note with OBV, I'm not sure on the exact details of the question, but you can separate OBV.
Categorise,
yeah. This player offers a lot of on-ball value with carries. This player does it through passing, dribbling, whatever it may be. So certain players will show up better than others in certain specific departments, and you can use that to determine what you're chasing in the transfer market. Say you want a winger or something like that, you'll maybe look at dribbles and carries. If you want someone like a 6, potentially, you'll look at more passing and receiving and things like that.
Yeah, the good question from Andrew Pearl. He says this: wants to understand if the data points in anywhere towards the optimal front three based on expected goals. I think it's interesting in that you haven't read it, I presume. Maybe you have. I got an advance copy. I interviewed him yesterday of Ian Graham's book.
I'm halfway in.
Oh, you're good. I'm made up. Yeah. So one of the things that's in there that I think is quite interesting is he talks about building an attack, and they have the conversation around this idea that it begins to be, the way he frames it is you don't want 3 shooters. I don't know if you got that far in yet.
No.
But okay, he says you don't want 3. And it's this idea that you need there to be what becomes the providing force. So, he obviously, when he talks about the front three he's able to say, well, the good thing was all 3 of them could do some of everything, but Firmino did more of this, then Mane did more of this, and Salah did more of sticking the ball in the back of the net and being there. And I think that's why it's not just as simple as for Liverpool, the 3 lads who get the highest expected goals at any given time. It is about meshing between the skills that get you up the pitch, look after the ball, but then also ensure that you get quality opportunities. And that's why I think Salah's semi-reinvention that he constantly seems to go through, I think is really interesting from Liverpool's point of view, because I wonder whether or not there will be a little bit of a shift this season that I think you began to see bits of last season, but it obviously needs whoever it is who plays centre forward to stick it in the back of the net. But to the idea that Salah's could almost become a bit more of the glue that links it all together. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, well, I talk quite often, and people who subscribe to my Substack will see this as well, but I always talk about Liverpool within the context of like the team is a recipe almost. What you're delivering on a pitch is a recipe, and I think when we had the original front three of Mane, Salah, Firmino, it was just beautiful. It was just harmonious, and the recipe was perfect because everything that Firmino didn't do, Salah and Mane did, and vice versa as well. I think now, current Liverpool, if you look at some of the key cogs in there, like say for example Núñez, very, very different to Firmino, gets on the ball a lot less, helps in midfield a lot less, connects a lot less, and I think you just kind of, with players like Núñez, potentially Jota as well comes to mind, I think you just kind of bleed possession a little bit more with those players. So if you're going to put them in your attack, it makes sense to just combine them with someone who's maybe a bit more of a glue guy in there. Maybe Salah is gonna become that. Maybe Gakpo can become that potentially. Szoboszlai can help with that. But you overall, I think you're right in saying that. Like if you've got too many shooters in there, it is a bit roller coaster in it, and you do need someone to every now and then just kind of chill. You know what I mean? Just relax, lads.
Chill a little bit. Got another couple of things on the Twitter. I'll come back onto that in a second or two. Well, in fact, I'll ask them one first because you'll have a good answer for this. Mark Brown just says he found the race map stuff we discussed really interesting. Where's the best place they're just freely available to the public? Where do you like to get them from?
Probably Understat is probably the best place to get them freely available for the public. I think the ones you use are StatsBomb, which obviously you have to pay for. The Man on the Street cannot afford them. Probably, no. I'm assuming.
Sorry.
Yeah, but Understat is a good place for publicly available stats, and if you want to see the story of a game in expected goals terms based on per minute, use Understat. It's a good place.
There you go. Very, very useful indeed. Easyoli says he thinks everyone's underestimating Zubi. Thinks his class, his numbers will be much better with us. He's just as good as Caicedo, if not a better fit for Slot. There's an interesting couple of comments underneath. Chris Stockton goes on to say, is our midfield going to be physical enough? If you've got Zubimendi in there, you need someone physical next to him or with him. That's what sets Rodri and Rice apart.
A lot of people have said this.
What do you feel about that?
I understand the concerns. I think he's good enough in the air and stuff like that. I think his height is actually underplayed. I think he could put on a bit more muscle, basically. I think he would if he came to Liverpool. As a collective, I'd be viewing it as a midfield too.
So I'm viewing it as a 2 and a 1, and I think
Yeah,
they're going to defend in a pair. They're going to build in a pair. That's not to say someone's not going to come back in. I think you've seen what was really interesting, and you pointed out as well when we did review with Dan, was that they were defending. The defensive shape became 4-4-2 quite quickly. So that suggests you're defending as a pair in there as well. So I think it is. You know, I think I don't think you can't pin your colours to the Masters of being 4-2-3-1, not least because I don't think that the 3 will necessarily exist as a line behind the 1. I think there's a chance 1 or 2 of the wide players plays either on the same line as the 1 or possibly even higher, if you see what I mean. So I think I don't want to necessarily get bogged down in that, but I think that out of possession he will defend as a 2 predominantly, yes.
See, the reason I ask is because it's important to note whether we're considering Szoboszlai as part of this midfield unit, because if we are, he's a hell of a physical specimen in there. He's like 6'1" or something like that. He can run forever. Absolute unit in there. He's like Henderson really, but far more technical. So if you're counting Szoboszlai in there, obviously he helps a lot. But I think going back to the original question, I think it will be, as I said earlier, a 2 of Zubimendi and McAllister. Now, I would understand why someone would say not physical enough, can't cover enough ground. I probably agree. But I also think you can get around that just by using the ball a lot better, being a very compact,
very much so.
Vertically and horizontally. If you're a compact 4-4-2, 4-4-2 is a brilliant defensive shape, mate. So if you've got that right, honestly, you won't get stung too much as long as you've got a control over the game. Like Jorginho is doing well for Arsenal whenever he plays.
He's really important at the end of last season. Really important. I think he's dead interesting, Jorginho, in that. I think the other thing that's easily forgotten is, there's a game last season where no one makes more ball has since they've been counting them, made more ball recoveries for Liverpool than McAllister. I think because McAllister's not massive, we miss out the bits where he's a scrapper.
Thiago was another player I'd throw in there. Thiago's ball winning numbers were brilliant. He won the ball far more often than Jordan Henderson did, despite being half the size. Spanish, looks like a luxury player. You'd think he was a lightweight. No, he absolutely put himself about. So sometimes I think we maybe put a bit too much emphasis on, is he massive in English football, especially modern English football as well. And I think overall, if you look at Liverpool as a collective unit, you still have Van Dijk in there, Kwanzaa, Kanate will be playing at times. Nunes is a big lad. Szoboszlai. So I think we're still going to be. I don't think it's as much of a concern as people are stressing.
Excellent. John Cale says Zubimendi can use NordVPN to watch his favourite Basque shows, which might be worth remembering if anyone's in part of that negotiation at this point. The idea. Carl Chadwick says about tracking midfield runners. I think that we've already talked about. He's hard to dribble past. That's what the numbers tell us. In Zubimendi, he's hard to dribble past, and it goes from there with him. I think that other little bits and pieces. There's the idea here of whether or not Liverpool are penny pinching. I don't think they can be, Josh. I think they know when they start this. And part of what they're engaging with is a release clause. It's part of what they engage with Szoboszlai. It's part of what they engage with McAllister. I actually think it suits Liverpool to say, I can imagine why it suits Richard Hughes to have a world where it's basically, this is the value, this is how much we put down, this is how much of what we think we're going to spend this summer goes on this player, and this is what we think it does to move the needle for us.
Yeah,
I think that's what Liverpool. I think almost that. I think Liverpool would almost like every deal to work that way, even though they may, for instance, at times feel a bit like, well, the payment terms we could do with working on that. I think they almost would be pleased that there's a set price here, and we can make our assessments in amongst that using the data and the evidence of our eyes and everything else.
Well, we know that Liverpool do that. We know that Liverpool make decisions financially in terms of buying players based on what that player will return, strictly in terms of points. Like, I think a lot of the time that's just like a vague guess from some scouts who's been on the field for years and years, but Liverpool can put a number on that in terms of this player will improve us over the course of a season by so many points, and if he's got a release clause, you know exactly what he's going to be worth. And I think just generally looking at Liverpool's first 11, I think the obvious upgrade was getting in a specialist who was going to be an upgrade on Endo, and Liverpool are tackling that first and foremost. It's just a really. I think sometimes the data can just move you towards the really obvious move. Like getting in Alisson at the time was just the really sensible move to get an upgrade and a goal. Van Dijk as well, whereas a lot of clubs would have sold Coutinho and thought, right, we need to replace Coutinho. No, you did that 6 months earlier with Salah. You'd be fine. So sometimes it just brings you to the most sensible move, and that's getting in the top 6.
Yeah, just I want to do a couple more comments and then we'll wrap it. Bruce says, I hope Morton is given a chance of squad depth this year with more games and tired legs. I think he could impress if given a chance. I think if this happens, I think Morton has to go, almost for himself. You got Basetic and Trey Ione both knocking on the door. We've mentioned the 4 already. We've mentioned Szoboszlai being able to play deeper if you needed it. I think you'll have other roles, possibly off a flank, maybe Elliott as well, where Elliott's been playing in the pre-season games. I think, though, for his own good, I think if this guy is coming in, I think it is difficult to see where Morton gets his games, and he probably does have to move on at this point in proceedings, which is a shame because he's looked perfectly good footballer.
It is a shame, yeah, because I do rate him. I like him whenever I've seen him. I think he uses his head when he's playing. He's got a natural feel for the ball. He feels like one of those players who just naturally kind of gets the game. It's like an innate thing with him. But in terms of his level, probably is upgradable if we're being realistic when it comes to Liverpool specifically and the aspirations to win the Champions League and the Premier League and things like that. So if you get in a player like Zubimendi and you're playing with a midfield 2, Morton would fit that midfield 2, but does he get in ahead of Gravenberch, McAllister, Zubimendi, someone I'm missing?
Jones,
yeah, Jones is the player that I'm missing. So the answer is probably no. So when it comes to that, let him get minutes elsewhere, take a fee for him, potentially throw in some kind of buyback thing in there if he thrives, or a sell-on fee or something like that. But I think he'll have a good career regardless, Morton.
Yep, absolutely with that 100%. People are saying that we should worry and be embarrassed if it doesn't happen. No, I'd rather tell people about footballers who it looks like Liverpool are going to buy, and if they don't buy them, it's perfectly straightforward. It's not that difficult. It's literally a key part of the job.
There's alternatives, by the way, as well. It'd be interesting to see who the alternatives would be if Liverpool...
Who do you think they'd be?
I think Maxence Kakara is a player that I like from Lyon. I've been looking at him lately. I like Varela for Porto. But some of the others I've kind of withheld looking into because the Zubimendi news broke. Have you got anyone?
You mentioned the lad from Lyon, Kakare, which you had a good run up of saying the name of. I think I end up sort of not that far away. I said yesterday on the show, there's a lot of talk around Hugo Larsson in Germany, the Swedish lad who's only 20. And whilst I'd be loath to sort of dip down, I feel as though if they wanted to almost say, well, a bit of this is planning for the future and we roll from there, then I think that could work for them. It might be that just comes a year too early for him and where he's up to in terms of his development. But I do sort of like him. Beyond that, I am not... I think you end up compromising on the technical aspects.
Yeah, like I was thinking someone like Florentino Luis is a player who's always been kind of circling in Liverpool circles, but it feels like he's not as technical to me. And
I think that's the... I think that's the thing that I think they'll be most loath to do. I don't think they'll want to compromise on the technical aspects. And I think that's the... So I think you are looking for... I think what Zubimendi tells us is that their ideal for the position is a technician. And I thought that anyway, watching how they were playing. I thought that looking at what was happening in Feyenoord, I thought that. But now, I don't think you can get away from the idea that what they want is they want someone who can make the ball work for them. And I think that they'll be... If they have to compromise on Zubimendi and they go down a level or go to the next name on the list, whether it's up or down a level, I think that the next one might be, in a way, even more technical. You know, it might be that they compromise on, well, Zubimendi, someone's looked at it and gone, he's also really good in the air, and they've gone, okay, well, that gives... It might be that the next one isn't really good in the air. I think that's what they'll compromise. I think they'll compromise on the physicality to get the technicians. Yeah,
watching Liverpool on the slot so far, I think that what Liverpool want from this 6 is a solution to the first phase, a solution to the build-up phase, getting you out of that defensive third, because we've looked okay at times, but we've also looked really shaky at times, and this is why I've used Peace Jorginho as an example of the player that I think would now be suitable to Liverpool.
Completely agree.
Really slight, really slow, not particularly physical, but brilliant when it comes to conducting moves to get you out the defensive third if you're building the game. So that's what I still think Liverpool are going to target, whether we get Zubimendi or not.
Yeah, someone has said something that occurred to me last night. Well, yeah, it was last night. Someone, Sukipa, has said should have got Kante. There was a point a couple of days ago or last night. I was just sort of thinking, if they're not sure for a year, they could actually do worse than something a bit mad like that. That's why one of the reasons why Arsenal end up with Jorginho is as simple as they're looking for a holding position for 12 months while they solve the problem, and in the end they've given him another year now. The Kante issue is, I don't think it's as much as age, it's the number of injuries he picks up, and I think that's what might put Liverpool off. Something like that. I think that they might end up doing something that's a little bit unorthodox if this one falls through. But we'll see on that one as it goes. The
only thing I'd be surprised about with that is if it is a new regime taking charge of this, with Richard Hughes bringing in his first man and all that, I would just be surprised if Richard Hughes' first signing was 28 onwards or something.
I think if that happens, I think that'll be one of those ones that's like 31st of August. We've looked at everything, we've weighed everything up before they do something like that. I think that's the way around it will go. I think it will be that way around, and they just have to sort of go from there with it. But I do think that ultimately, I just think that he just want a technical player. And I think that some people are going to find that frustrating. But I think that,
there's always an emphasis with when you're signing sixes. Everyone always points out he's not very quick, is he? And then beyond that, they'll look at, is he massive? And if he's neither of them two, people tend to worry. But looking at this style of play that we've signing him for, it's very, very technical. It's about baiting the press, and I keep comparing it to Brighton's De Zerbi. If you've watched Brighton under De Zerbi, it's like that. So everyone in there has to have a really nice feel for the ball. They have to be confident enough to ask for the ball, regardless of how many men are surrounding them and that. And not every player is like that. So this is why the need for the technicians growing.
Yeah, excellent stuff. I completely agree. Chris Stockton quickly says, strange we've gone so public with the whole transfer story from the start. I don't think Liverpool have gone that public, to be honest with you, Chris. I think that we think that from time to time, but I don't think that Liverpool are the ones who wanted this to be out there from the start. I think it's worth pointing that out and being aware of it. I don't think Liverpool pulled a press conference in or anything like that and said, let's go on this one. Other people find out, ask questions, and then people do need from time to time to be given honest answers out, and that's the way in which it goes in there. Listen, we've gone very long on this, but we've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you very much to NordVPN. Do sign up, nordvpn.com/TAW. Ash for producing it and pulling the whole thing together. Also, Josh Williams for as ever taking the time. We're going to do more trend stuff all the way through, and someone asked for the idea of maybe pulling trends, statsy sort of stuff in with review stuff. We're going to be doing that over the season as well, once a month in international breaks, and we're going to be pulling a trend show through as well every week, looking back at Liverpool stats and also other things that have grabbed our attention in the Premier League. I'm really looking forward to the campaign. I'm looking forward to more stuff like this. It's great to work with Josh. It's great to work with Ash. This is the Anfield Wrap, and we roll with the punches.
Bring your digital life to a whole new level with NordVPN. Choose the fastest VPN on the planet and explore the internet without interruption.